I'm honored to present one of our heroes in the fight for justice, Andrea Miller. She is the founder of the Center for Common Ground and the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. And I'm sure many of the grassroots organizers and activists here today who have worked with her on phone banking and texting and postcarding will agree she is the most innovative and important leader in the country working to give access to voting to voters of color and those who have been most affected by voter suppression, including the youth. So Andrea is going to take us through today her presentation, and it's a lot of news in it. And take it away, Andrea.
Susan, thank you so much for that really totally incredible introduction. Whenever I hear it, I'm like, oh, I want to meet that person. I'm like, oh, darn, it's me. So anyway, thank you all for attending my session. I am so excited to talk to people about the work that we do at Center for Common Ground. Now, I am based in Virginia, which used to be a voter suppression state. Thanks to some really hard work by me and a lot of dedicated activists, now we're not a voter suppression state. The mission of Center for Common Ground is a very simple one. Our mission is to empower underrepresented voters. And now, prior to this year, we considered underrepresented voters to be community of color voters, African American, Hispanic, Asian, and also Native American. The board will be looking at, do we declare 18 to 24-year-olds as underrepresented voters as well? Because when we look at elected office in this country, there is no one more underrepresented than 18 to 24-year-olds. So we will be taking that up probably after this election. I don't know that we're going to try to do it during the election. Anyway, we run two main campaigns here at Center for Common Ground. Most people know the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. That campaign has become famous with activists, infamous if you are a county registrar in a voter suppression state. We are also a technology company, and we will be talking about our tactics, strategies, and techniques for reaching underrepresented voters. And we will also be introducing you to our new technology. Next slide, please. Now, the state of voting in the United States. Voting in the United States is not a right. And whenever I hear people refer to voting rights, it makes me crazy. Voting in the United States is a privilege. And that privilege has been expanded from the 1% of the day when the United States Constitution was written. And the only people who could vote were rich white men. We have used constitutional amendments to expand the vote. Looking at all the changes that have been made to state law that are disenfranchising millions of people, we are going to need to take another shot at voting rights in the Constitution. Anyway, there are currently 245 million age-eligible voters in the United States. Of those 245 million voters, 48 million of them are either inactive or they are now unregistered. I sometimes refer to that as deregistered, meaning they used to be registered, but now, courtesy of their county board of elections or their state board of elections, they are no longer registered to vote. And of those 48 million, 16.6 million are community of color voters. Those are our voters. Next slide, please. Now, what does a voter suppression state look like? Well, it looks exactly the opposite of what states like California look like. In a voter suppression state, say like Texas, you will be deregistered for not voting. In Texas, you need to renew your voter registration more frequently than you renew your driver's license. Um, Voter suppression states also have strict photo ID requirements. People are going, what's wrong with photo ID? Well, when you look at southern states, prior to 1967, African Americans could not be born in hospitals in southern states. They were normally born at home. That meant that if you had a home birth and if you were rural, there might have been a very, very good chance prior to 1967 that the standard paperwork process to get a birth certificate might not have been done. So that means that now, if you are 60, 70 years old, and now you need to get a certified copy of your birth certificate, that may require an attorney and quite a bit of legwork. And many rural voters just don't have the money. Many urban voters don't have the money now either. And the other thing that may happen is it's generally a lot easier to do all this on the internet. And if you don't use computers and don't have access to the internet, this can be a problem. It is estimated that more than 20% of voters do not have a photo ID. Also, one of the other things we see is that there is no automatic voter registration and there is no same-day registration. We've also learned that up to 60% of voters who have been deregistered by their county or state boards of elections don't know they are no longer registered to vote and technically can't. So that means when they present themselves to vote on election day or during early voting, if their state does not offer same-day registration, and most of these states do not, they are going to be turned away from the polls and told you are not a qualified voter because you are not registered. And then finally, in 2020, we are going to need to expect voter intimidation at the polls, physical intimidation, the likes of which we haven't seen since the 1960s. So next slide, please. Originally, when we started our planning for 2020, we were anticipating that we would have between 4,000 and 6,000 volunteers. So we thought we would be able to support 6 states. And the 6 states that we came up with, we wanted the states to have a voting age population that was 20% community of color. We wanted the state to have a history of voter suppression. Boy, do these states qualify. And so the initial states that we selected were Alabama, Arizona, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, Texas. Well, we now have, at the very beginning of August, 15,000 volunteers. So we decided to add 2 additional states. Next slide, please. Florida and South Carolina. Next slide. And just going, boy, that was a really short slide. We run 4 distinct campaigns at Reclaim Our Vote. We run voter registration, and that campaign is to unregistered voters. Because our volunteer base has grown so large, and so many of our volunteers are from faith organizations who love our postcarding campaign, we now have a postcarding capacity of between 300,000 and 500,000 postcards per week. So we added 3 new campaigns to active voters. Campaign number 2, Pledge to Vote and Do More. We ran that campaign in North Carolina, where we wrote 1.2 million community of color voters in North Carolina, and we asked them to pledge to vote and do more. Take additional people to vote with you, make voting a social occasion. Join us and make phone calls, send text messages, and we're going to be adding a new one, become a paid poll worker inside the polls. And of course, this year we're going to do GOTV work. We do have the writers to do that and do the outreach. And we did a lot of vote by mail. We did vote by mail to 65 and older in Texas. We did the Arizona permanent early voting list. And we also did Georgia vote by mail. And we were one of the first organizations to discover there was going to be an incredible problem in Fulton County, Georgia, because before we release any of our postcard campaigns, our volunteers called the registrar number and they reported to me the registrar in Fulton County is not answering. So we did not release that Fulton County campaign for vote by mail. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about what the Pledge to More campaign did. I pretty much already walked you through it. That's the slide that says this is what we're going to do. One of the other integral parts on the Pledge to Vote and Do More is we develop applications, and we have an application that we call See Something, Say Something. That's going to be the report election problems. It automatically maps them online and it quantifies them because it's writing it into a database. Next slide. Now, in 2020 so far, we have made 433,000 phone calls. We started our phone banking campaign in January of 2020. So we got an early start. That gave us an opportunity to work some of the primaries, and we predominantly work the primaries to see what are the challenges that voters are facing. We also did some voter registration, and we also have our postcard campaign. I've already gone through the different types of campaigns that we run. So we postcard all 4 of our campaign types. We also phone bank all 4 of our campaign types. So far, we have done 3.5 million postcards. Our original planning in November of 2019 was we hoped that we were going to be able to make our goal was 500,000 phone calls. We are obviously going to blow way past that number. And we were thinking in terms of postcards. In 2019, we sent 347,000 postcards. So we thought, all right, maybe we should be able to send 1.5, 2 million postcards. We've obviously blown well past that. We're thinking now we are looking at 5 million postcards, maybe a few more. And we want to present our postcards. We're very excited about our postcards who were designed by an Indigenous undocumented immigrant artist who is one of the tri-chairs of the Virginia Poor People's Campaign. Notice the postcard in the middle, vote for our lives. We never could have dreamed how prescient that particular sentiment on that postcard was. We are now having that postcard turned into a car magnet, and we will be distributing that car magnet to our in-state activists that are on the ground as part of a mobile billboard campaign. Now, 2020 is a presidential election year, and there's one number and only one number that those of us who work elections need to know about a presidential race, and that number is 270. In 2016, we came up 39 votes short. In 2020, all the states we had in 2016, we again are going to win. That means we need 39 states that we did not win in 2016. Here are the states where we are working and their electoral college value. All right, drum roll, please. We won Alabama in 2017, and we believe we can win in Alabama again. The road to victory in Alabama goes through the Alabama Black Belt. Alabama has 9 electoral votes. Arizona has 11 electoral votes. We won in Arizona in 2018. We're looking to go back. North Carolina has 15 electoral votes. We had an opportunity to work in North Carolina 3 in 2019 for the special election, and we won statewide in 2018. So North Carolina has 15 votes. My family hails from Mississippi, and we came really, really close in the special election in 2019. Mississippi only had 6 electoral votes, but I do have to admit that I have a certain enjoyment of the thought of putting a Black man in the United States Senate in the great state of Mississippi. Georgia. We won the 6th district in Georgia in 2018, and the candidate who ran in the special election is running again, and Georgia has not won but 2 Senate seats. Georgia brings us 16 electoral votes. And then, of course, there is the great state of Texas with 38 of the 39 votes we need all in one place. Yes, Texas is second to California in number of electoral votes. Texas is basically 5 Virginias in one. But while everyone thought we were absolutely insane in 2019 for putting Texas on our list, look at Texas now. Florida and South Carolina were literally added 2 weeks ago, and that brings our electoral college all to 133 votes. We know that in 2020, that when we win, we better put an exclamation point on it. All right, now, Texas, 38 electoral votes, roughly. There's 14 million total active voters now. This slide is from January. And I want you to notice that Texas, 1 million African-American voters, 3.2 million Hispanic voters, nearly 300,000 Asian voters, and Native American voters. Texas is nearly 34% community of color state. That means Texas, purely by the numbers, should be very winnable. Now, Texas also has 5.1 million deregistered voters. We actually had whittled that number down to 3.9 million deregistered voters by the end of April. But states have the ability to clean/purge their voter rolls until the middle of August. And Texas has begun purging her voting rolls, and we are now back up to 4.6 million deregistered voters, getting ready to go into that final dash for November. And 2.3 million of those voters are community of color. A lot of people in this group hopefully have heard of an election strategist by the name of Rachel Bytkofer. Rachel and I both predicted the 2018 run on the US House. Rachel in 2019 did a study on 9 congressional districts in Texas. And those districts were ones where in 2018, Beto took at least 44% of the vote out of that district. So the first thing that I did was I looked at those districts racially. What are the numbers in those districts? And then the next thing that I looked at was the community of color voters that were in that district. Did those voters turn out? And the answer was, with 44 or more percentage of the vote, Beto left more than 50% of the community of color vote on the table. That told me there were voters to be turned out in Texas. Now, I love my numbers. I know they give a lot of people a headache. So I'm just going to tell you what the numbers represent. The numbers represent the changing demographics in these 9 congressional districts in Texas. The folks who live in these districts make a lot of money, and they are very, very well educated. This district is no longer populated by the oil workers that were wildcatters. These districts are now populated by people who work in the IT sector of the oil and gas industry. Many of them have relocated from states like California, Washington, Oregon, New England, New York, and New Jersey. They came to Texas because the cost of living in Texas is significantly less than where they live or where they previously lived, and they had an opportunity for a lifestyle. So the face of Texas is changing, and it's changing rapidly. Now, North Carolina is another state that is changing rapidly. It's significantly smaller than Texas. We won there in 2018. And when we look at North Carolina, it's 28% community of color, predominantly African American. And they've got 2.3 million deregistered voters. Like Texas, there are districts in North Carolina that are changing. 246 are the Research Triangle expansion districts. They were ungerrymandered by the court. And when you look at these numbers look very, very encouraging. We did a lot of work in North Carolina 3 in 2019 for the special election. On the tail end of a hurricane in an election that nobody knew was there, and only on $12,000 of my money, because I couldn't get anybody else to come in with us, we were able to achieve the best Democratic performance in North Carolina 3 in the history of North Carolina 3. We did better than in the Obama years. So based on what we know about North Carolina 3, we're going back. And then there was phenomenal work done in North Carolina 9 by all the progressive groups. So we added North Carolina 9 as well. And we're not really going to go through this, but again, this is how I do my analysis. Racially, what do the districts look like? Income. Is it still a poor district, or are the people economically better off, and are they more educated than the people who lived in the district before? Now, tools. We invest in a lot of tools. One of the new tools that our board member Deepak Puri built this year was a tool called Text%. And that's because hustle cost a dime per text. Text% cost a penny. We also built something very special into Text%. Arizona, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Texas are all states that use vote centers. One of the problems for community of color voters with vote centers, especially urban ones, is they don't know where the vote centers are because every election they move. Notice I said every election, not every year. So what we did was we had created a phone bot where you could call it, give it your county and your zip code, and it would tell you your latest or nearest vote center. It would also tell you when it was open because they're not all open at the same time. So we decided to integrate that into our texting tool. So we currently have a best of breed texting tool. We are going to encourage our voters of color to early vote because what we discovered in Georgia and in Texas was that many people refuse to put that vote by mail ballot in the mail. They wanted to take that ballot somewhere and leave it somewhere official. So we're like, okay, we will do the vote by mail thing, but for people who are stubborn and hard-headed and won't do that, we will help them early vote. Now, remember, in Texas, you have to be 65 years old or meet one of the other acceptable excuses to actually vote by mail. So early voting in Texas is really going to be key to getting people out safely. We also are going to be looking for which is what we did for the Georgia primary. We texted people the map of every early vote and drop box location in the great state of Georgia. And the 7 counties where we concentrated our efforts had very few problems with vote by mail or early voting. Now, one of the other things we realized is we are going to need to control the inside of polling locations, especially in community of color neighborhoods. So we are creating a new campaign. We are recruiting for the National Vote Force. The National Vote Force will be 18 to 40-year-old people, younger people being paid poll workers working inside. Number one, our younger people are less susceptible to COVID than normally the seniors who generally work elections. They are also more adept at operating digital technology. It also prepares the next generation to run our election infrastructure. And in community of color environments, it gives us the ability to create a welcoming environment inside the polling location, especially if they have had a non-welcoming environment outside. To that end, we've actually created an app. It's called Vote Force with one word. And that app is available in both the Apple iPhone store and the Android store. We will be using that app to recruit people, younger people, to work the polls. We are also creating an app of all of the rules and all the links to apply to be a poll worker. And when that app is done, it will be distributed through VoteForce. Campus outreach. We are going to be geofencing every community college and university in all of our states. What is geofencing? What we are going to be doing is we've already looked up every campus and we know where the administration building is. We will be locating the web server. whether the students are on campus attending class or whether they are attending class remotely, they will be connected to the university web server. By connecting to the web server, we will be able to locate the digital devices of faculty, staff, and students, and we will be able to send them an ad. Now, this is the sample ad that we used in North Carolina in 2019. Our votes decide elections, and elections have consequences, increase power in our communities, help determine our own destiny. We had 2 ads in 2019. We will have 50 ads, maybe more, in 2020. And again, our young voters are very, very important. Our older voters are important too, but not all of our older voters love living in a digital space. We have commissioned Motive Vote, and we are making it available for all of our states. We will be encouraging students to create their college campus on Motive Vote and encouraging their friends to join Motive Vote, where they will be able to check their voter registration, get notified if their registration status changes, and also get reminders. Do you have a voting plan? Are you voting early? Are you voting on election day? Are you voting by mail? Whatever you select, it will then send you to the proper place where you can sign up or get more information on whatever vote method you chose. This is a sample of teams on Motive Votes. They can be organizations, they can be colleges and universities. And we're not sure what or who we're going to be taking to the polls, but we do have our Give a Ride app. So someone described this as free Uber for voting. This is designed so that we load every polling location or early vote location in the state when a voter needs a ride, and we ask the question in our text banks and our phone banks. We transfer the voters into Give a Ride, and then we assign drivers based on what drivers are supporting what vote center / polling location. Now, see something, say something. We developed a digital election reporting tool, problem reporting tool, that will be in use this year, like it was in 2018. MSNBC has also requested to be able to have this in their election room. This will show a voter or anyone can report an election problem, their phone, their tablet, their computer. What we will be adding in again this year is they will be able to take a video, voter intimidation. We've got pictures, we've got video, and that information will immediately post to a national map, as I said, and MSNBC, in addition to our team, will be looking at that map. We will be able to spot whether an incident is an isolated incident or are we looking at a systemic election problem. And we're going to go one more. We do not seed rural. We are getting ready to make an election billboard buy in communities of color, probably of which the likes have not been seen. These are the billboards that we bought in 2019. We buy digital billboards so that on a moment's notice, in 20 minutes, if things on the ground change, we can immediately change the message.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. And y'all, we will see you in session 2.
All right, great.
All right. Bye, everyone.